We're going live. We are live.
Live.
Hey, everyone. It is Real Talk with Rachel Dawn. Hashtag Real Talk with Rachel Dawn. Episode 10. And I have my friend JD.
Howdy, howdy.
And my friend Jessica here with me tonight. You have met both of them previously because they have each told their their now what stories on Real Talk episodes in the past. If you haven't caught those, you can head over to the page, find past videos, or even go to my YouTube channel. It's definitely up there, and see
and
their...
mine's on your page.
Correct, but it's on my YouTube channel.
Oh.
So yes, so you can check all the old videos out there. But we're going to ask you right now, if you would, please share this video on your timeline. Where did I put my tablet? Did I not? I didn't even.
I don't think you got it.
I went upstairs to get it, and then I didn't have it.
And isn't it supposed to be here?
We were going to check comments. So, you're on my core team page, so not that.
Daggone it.
So you should there, right there. We're going to do techie stuff.
Yeah.
Because we're all fabulous.
Because we really want it to go live.
See,
and I was supposed to already have done that. Which
That's okay. So you should be able to share it. Oh, no, I don't know how to share it. Where's the share button?
There, I think it was
shared
there.
it.
You
It's on
share
there.
it.
All right, we'll
there.
fair it. Okay.
I'm going to get my coffee.
Gotta have
tea.
All right.
My tea. Okay.
We are excited about today.
We are. We're very excited.
It's going to be a lively conversation, I think.
It is?
You think?
For sure.
Very much.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
I mean, we talk a little. We like talking. I think everybody likes to talk.
Yes. And we're going to believe and pray and believe that all the good stuff didn't talk out before that. You guys should really be around for the pre-talks before the talks, because that's when
We'll start
all
taping
the
that,
good stuff
maybe,
happens.
yeah.
I'm telling
pregame.
you. The pregame, right.
Yeah.
Pre-gaming.
We need to have a pregame show.
That's real talk right there. That is real talk. So, thank you for joining us tonight. If you would, I saw my Meemaw just popped on. Hey Meemaw, how you doing?
Hi,
if you would, like I said, share this in your timeline. Hey Jarrett. And then also comment. Let me know that you're here. Just say hey. Whatever. Just say hi for me. Hey. And as we're going through this topic, as we're going through this tonight, feel free to comment, interject, ask questions, whatever. We're going to try to maybe ask some of the questions or answer some of the questions, engage. If not, I'll definitely answer you afterwards. So tonight, the topic is, why do bad things happen to good people? And this topic and this question is... I'm just going to real talk with you guys real quick. Hashtag real talk. This is not a topic that I want to cover. Like, this is not something that I even feel comfortable talking about because this is so hard. And I know, so as I was prepping for this topic and for this talk, I literally made a list, and I was just thinking about the people that I know that are going to be sitting on the other side of this screen. Tuning into this, wanting an answer to this question. And I know a lot of your stories. I know the kind of pain that you have been in or are currently still experiencing. You know, as I was thinking about this, I was thinking about like a friend of mine whose little girl died of SIDS when she was just a couple months old. I have another friend whose baby was stillborn. I have a good friend of mine up in Michigan. She was a mom of 4, and her youngest was only like a year old, and she was hit and killed by a car while she was riding her bike. And then, you know, people like Joyce Meyer, even, like, who was sexually abused by her father her whole life as a child. So those things are really, really, really hard things. And even the people that I'm sitting here with, right? Like JD, if you heard his story when we did his video before, like JD contracted a terminal illness.
Lung disease.
Yeah. And Jess over here on my right, your left, if you've heard her story, Jess went to prison for 4 years. So, like, those are really suck things. And so, like, why did that stuff happen, right? And so we're going to talk, we're not going to talk about those things, but I just wanted you to know that if you're sitting here right now and you're dealing with something that is something bad or painful or hurtful happening in your life right now, or if you have in the past, I want you to know, like, my whole goal of tonight is not to just flippantly dismiss that or or pass over that. I want you to know that, like, I know how real that pain is, and I know how much that can hurt. I know how easy it is to get angry at God and turn against Him in those situations, and really ask that question, like, why, God? Why is this happening to me? And so I get it, and I want you to know that that's my heart as I approach this topic tonight. So, yeah, let's just dive right in. So as I was thinking about this, and I told Jess and JD this, again, this is not a topic that I wanted to cover. And so I pulled out this book that I have that's literally called The Questions That Christians Hope No One Will Ask. And I thought, I hope that they have that chapter in there and it will give me some guidance. And so sure enough, they do. That chapter 5 in this book is, how could a good God allow so much evil, pain, and suffering, or does He simply not care? And really, as I read through this chapter, the biggest thing that it gave me was just confidence in that, kind of how I'm thinking about this topic, and it's not even an answer, but what I want to discuss with you guys tonight is kind of in line with their explanation of it. And so, first of all, like, can we say that out loud real quick? Like, this, we're not going to give you the answer to this question tonight. Sorry, spoiler alert. Because, like, there is no
clicking off.
right.
Now.
There is no, like, hard and fast answer. Okay.
Okay, next.
Like, really. So we just want to talk through it with you guys. Kind of talk about some things that maybe we have.
But we have our own experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, we'll give you our experience.
We've
but
gotten
we
some
think
revelation on some things.
Seen some stuff.
So when I started reading this chapter, and this is kind of where my heart was, I just want to read these quick parts to you real quick. It said, this issue, this question, easily made our top 10 list of questions that Christians hope no one will ask, tying in with several others in 5th place. But in a separate survey, this one question came out number 1 by a considerable margin. This is generally considered to be the number 1 issue causing people to doubt or believe the existence of God, and it has been so for a millennia. How we respond is vitally important for the spiritual progress of ourselves and a lot of people will encounter, including some of our close friends and family. And then here's the point, I love this point that they made. When your friends are experiencing pain, they are probably not asking for an explanation as much as they're looking for empathy, concern, and tangible expressions of love. Right? And so when people are asking that question, why, God, why is this happening to me? A lot of times they're not really looking for a clear-cut answer. They're really just asking for love in that minute. You know what I mean? And for empathy and compassion. And so, again, that's how we're approaching this topic tonight. And so really the first answer that I have, the first kind of point that I want to hit on for why bad things happen to good people is that we live in a broken, fallen world. And that's kind of like church speak. So let's take this back. So if you're in any way remotely familiar with the Bible, right in Genesis, it talks about how God created the world. And when you read that story, you can understand that God created the world originally as this perfect utopia. Everything was great. There was no disease. There was no famine. There were no floods. There were no natural disasters. There was no shedding of blood whatsoever. The first animals didn't eat each other, and people didn't eat animals. I mean, it was this perfect place and world, and everything was in harmony. And I'm sure you've heard the story about the snake in the garden and Adam and Eve and them eating the forbidden fruit. And so that was them choosing. God set up this perfect world and this perfect plan and gave them kind of, hey, if you operate in this and walk with me and hang out with me, your life's going to be swell. But He gave us all free will at the same time. And you got to go point about that. We'll talk about that some more. But with that free will, what the first man and woman did is they chose to walk away from God. They chose to disobey the one rule that He gave them. And when that happened, sin entered the world for the first time. And so this perfect utopia that God created was no longer perfect. And with that sin entering into the world, that disobedience, that brokenness, that imperfection, then everything else kind of spiraled out of control. So imagine it would be so a top, right? So if you've got a spinning top and you've got it spinning and it's just going perfectly, but if you touch that in the slightest way, if it's affected in any way, it topples and it falls over and it's not going to continue spinning. That's what happened with the operation of the world, right? It toppled out of control. So with that, all sorts of things came into the world. It was the first death entered the world. It was everything that we see today in our world, brokenness, from disabilities and death and dismemberment and natural disasters and any sort of evil or bad or anything, all came into the world at that time because of that sin. And so God didn't put those things here. He didn't create those things. That was not his plan for the earth. But it was man's choices that brought that into the earth. And so we are all still living out the consequences of those choices, of that decision that Adam and Eve made, even today. And we have a very real enemy. If you've probably heard that, if you're familiar with the Bible at all, Satan, Lucifer, whoever, the devil, whoever you want to call him. So he was who entered the garden and tempted Adam and Eve to sin. He's still operating alive and well in the earth today. He's wreaking havoc on his own, and he's causing and leading and encouraging people to do bad and evil things as well. So that's just kind of a baseline that I wanted to lay so that we're all on the same page, that God doesn't do bad things to people. God created the world to be perfect and in harmony and everything great, and it was man's choice that brought sin into the world, that brought evil into the world, that kind of made things fall apart. So like I said, I just kind of wanted to lay that groundwork because I think that's an important thing to understand and just kind of work from that baseline, if you will.
Yeah.
So you had a good point about the question itself, and I want you to talk about that. So why do bad things happen to good people?
Well, I think if we're going to talk about, good versus bad, I think we ought to define what is good, right? And I think today we're kind of soft-soaked about what is good, So I've been reading a lot of C.S. Lewis and Mere Christianity, and he has a pretty good take on it about how there is the law of human nature, that if we throw a rock off the roof here, it's going to fall. If we jump off the roof, we'll fall also. But then there's the law of human nature, which is, or morality, where, and I'm getting a little stage fright, so hang on. Well, this is where we got it. Yeah.
There's nobody here, Jamie.
But that's right. So we have the choice on whether to obey. So, we know instinctively, where do we get that morality, right? We know instinctively what we ought to do.
Sure.
And then we don't do it.
Right.
So in that, we tend to, get caught up in the law per se.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But and there I go reading again. I don't know why I even make the notes. That's fine. But so the closer I get to Christ, the more I realize that I'm not that good.
Right.
And that also kind of played in with my own disease and everything else.
Right.
And I think if I really didn't get sick to slow down to really study some of this stuff and look into it, I probably would go on thinking that,
I'm
I'm really
person.
kind of this good person and, why did this happen to me and whatever. And, certainly mad about it all and everything else as it kind of came along and went through the stages of grief as we kind of talked about.
Right.
But that's not, so,
there's like a self-righteousness, like, well, I don't deserve this because I'm a good person, right? And so, where do we even get that idea? Because, like you said, if Jesus is the standard,
right,
we all fall so
all
short of that.
Somewhere under
so
that.
who are we to think?
You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, so I don't know. I'm kind of stuck there at the moment, but I think if we talk about that and just really, just because God, is omnipotent and all powerful doesn't really mean that, just because he can do something that he ought to. Mm-hmm. And there's this another book from C.S. Lewis in the Problem with Pain, where he kind of talks, and I want to kind of read this statement because it's a little, because I can't articulate him very well, as I just didn't do. I mean, I kind of did with us a little bit.
C.S. Lewis is smarter than all of us. Everybody
but so when it comes to people being good, now this is actually out of Mere Christianity too, but if you are a nice person, if virtues come easily to you, beware. Much is expected from those whom much is given. Mm-hmm. If you mistake for your own merits what are really God's gifts to you through nature, and if you are contented with simply being nice, you are still a rebel. And all those gifts will only make your fall more terrible, your corruption more complicated, your bad example more disastrous. The devil was an archangel once. His natural gifts were as far above yours as yours are above those of a chimpanzee. So, if, just because God can do something, doesn't, nonsense is still kind of nonsense. And, I guess just again, the closer I get to God, and we might be able to articulate that more as we kind of have the conversation, go on with the conversation, the more I know I'm not all that good. Right. So if I take that out of the equation, then the question just becomes, why do bad things happen?
Right, exactly.
And now we've kind of started to answer that, I think, with saying, hey, this is what happened with the fall and the whole 9 yards. Right. So I don't know.
Right. Or like even how we were talking about like just whether the situation is good or it is bad, and our perception of what is good and what is bad.
Things.
Yeah.
So how is this a bad thing and how is this a good thing?
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes our perspective, the same as that, is knowing, well, we feel like it's a bad situation, like we were saying. You have a relationship when you're younger and you're like, it's the end of your world and everything's over and like, no, how can you, God, let this man leave me? It's never going to be the same. And then you get older and you're like, right, gosh, thank goodness. So it's like our perspective of good and bad, and I think that's something we can talk about too. But just learning the perspective on that bad situation and what we can actually learn from that situation, and turning that bad situation into a good situation, and learning how what God's purpose is through that situation. And then, like we said, that. We hear people say, God never gives us anything more than we can handle, but, he certainly does. But he does that because he wants us to rely on him. Right. And without that, there wouldn't be a lot of things in my life that I wouldn't have right now if I hadn't have had that push to lean in that slight bit farther to that bad situation.
Yeah. Right. And when we were talking about that, I went and grabbed my prayer journal because it reminded me of what I read in Kristen Bonnen's book. I should have grabbed a copy of it so I could show you guys. It's a new book. She just released it. Kristen's a friend of mine. It's called Bare Naked Truths. And what she said in there that I wrote down in my prayer journal because it was so powerful to me was, I used to pray for the Lord to remove the problem or the person like in my life causing me grief, strife, whatever, until I realized problems and people build character. The things that make you happy are not necessarily the things that make you healthy. And my goal was a happy heart, but God's goal for me was a healthy soul. God always has something better waiting for us than what we left behind. And rather than asking him to fix my problems, I will ask him to fix my perspective. And I love that. Isn't that so great? So that's to Jess's point that, okay, so let's not overspeak this because a child being stillborn, that's a really bad thing. We can all agree that's a bad thing. That sucks.
But
that
nobody
hurts.
deserves that.
Nobody deserves that. No matter how good or bad you
let's
are.
kind of, you know what I mean?
We're not saying anybody deserves anything bad that happens to them either. Please don't mishear us there. But to Jess's point, and I'm so glad that we touched on that, is that some things that happen to us that we see as bad or even feel bad or look bad in the moment end up being good or better for us in the long term. Right. And we don't have that perspective. We don't know what God knows, right? We only know what we know in that moment. And so, so just like Jess said, God can take things that look bad, seem bad, feel bad in the moment and turn them around for good in the long run. In fact, he promises to do that in Romans, that God uses all things for the good of those who believe in him and rely on him.
But I guess to even rephrase that too, maybe it may be a bad situation, like you said. There
Right.
ultimately is bad situations,
right.
but maybe to rephrase what I said just a little bit more. But like you said, some
Like
things are
it's
definitely
just-
bad.
right,
They suck.
right.
There's no
Right,
way around
right.
it that it
Right.
doesn't suck.
Right.
But God is going to make something good out of it.
Absolutely.
Is what I
Always.
probably should say.
Always.
Like there is something like God will bless whatever is left in that situation
Right.
for sure, hands down. Like you
Right.
said, He promises that. Like
Right.
so, that's something that's definitely
Right.
going to happen.
So, one other point that I wanted to make, and kind of the flip side of all of that, is that, we live in a broken world. Things are going to happen because we live in a broken, fallen system, and people are broken. Every person is broken, okay? And so, like, I've said this a lot, and you've probably heard this before, hurting people hurt people. And so it's just a perpetual cycle. We're all broken. We're all hurting. We perpetuate that in life by hurting other people intentionally or unintentionally, so that sucks. But that's all a part of fallen creation. But sometimes the things that happen in our lives are our fault. And I think sometimes when we're asking, God, why'd you let this happen to me? Why is this bad thing? Like, why? Why would you do this? We need to have a moment of like self-reflection and realize like, oh, maybe I did have something to do with that. Because like for me, like when I was thinking through this question, I'm thinking like, well, and you mentioned that. So in your video, you're like, okay, I have this lung thing, and like, God, why did this happen to me? You're like, well, I did do like some construction work.
Why
with
didn't you wear a mask when I kind of told you when you were in those dirty warehouses tearing down racking?
Like,
why
maybe,
didn't you? Yeah.
Maybe that wasn't the most wise thing to do.
Yeah,
Jess, like, I went to jail, but I was also in a relationship with a guy who I knew was doing bad things, and I didn't do anything to get myself out of that situation. Me, like, when I had my health challenges with my gallbladder and my digestive system, I'm like, God, why would you do this to me? Like, I'm in the process of writing a book for you and, like, starting this ministry. And then I was like, oh, wait. I ate mac and cheese and fried things for like the first 25 years of my life. That may have been my fault just a little. Like maybe I had something to do with that. So there is definitely a time for like self-reflection and going like, well, did I have anything to do with this? Did I bring this on myself? And like to JD's point, like you mentioned, like there are going to be times when God is leading us to do things or not do things in or out of situations because he's trying to save us from something. He's trying to save us from ourselves. And we barrel right through that and we don't listen. And so, you definitely have to have that moment of self-reflection.
I think that was Jess's point too, right?
I brought this on myself. I brought this on myself. But the flip side of that coin is that when you're thinking about that, here's kind of the clarification that I want to make is that there is a fine line there, that it's really easy to go from taking personal responsibility and accountability for things that are our fault, that we could have changed, that we can take responsibility for now even, and taking on things that are not yours to take on, and letting that kind of understanding or revelation or whatever turn into guilt and condemnation. And what I know is that conviction from God about things that we should do, not do, whatever, it's always going to lead to reconciliation. God convicts us, the Holy Spirit convicts us to give us reconciliation with God. It's for our change, it's for our good, and it's to get closer to God. Any sort of guilt and condemnation that comes on you that just makes you feel bad about yourself, makes you want to distance yourself from God, that's not from God. Like guilt and condemnation that have that reaction in you, that is coming from the enemy. Because the enemy wants to separate you from God in whatever way he can. If that way is by getting you to do things that you shouldn't be doing, great. That's the way that he can do it. If you're finally back in line and you're living right and you're listening to God and you're obeying him and you're following him and you're trying to walk in relationship with him, then the enemy can just attack you with, well, but what about that thing that you did before? And well, you're not so great in this and whatever. And guilt and condemnation will make you want to drive away from God. So you have to watch for the tactics that the enemy will use too. So I just want you to know that, like, maybe have a moment of self-reflection, think about, but like, oh God, why does my child have cancer? that's not anything that you did. And for you to hear that, that's from the enemy. So just understand that. And that's even like in the Bible, like people ask Jesus, like, well, why did this happen to this person? Did he sin or did his parents sin? And Jesus is like, it has nothing to do with anybody's sin. Like, stop it, guys. And so that's an age-old thought that's all lies from the enemy. So.
Yeah, and I don't even know I don't have an answer for that. I think that's what we're kind of talking about at the beginning. I mean, if you ask us, well, why did that happen to the baby? Or, I have an abusive situation when I was young, and, from birth to 5, I showed you guys the picture, and I had to look at that as I got older. I was like, what could this 3-year-old kid have done to deserve the abuse? Yeah. Right. There's some, there's just evil. There's people who are mixed up. Right. You know what I mean? And
because that had nothing to do with you. That was the brokenness. How could it?
Well, I'm sure even if I was a kid running around, being a brat, kicking the trash can, or what I mean, or whatever, right? So the people that you were looking to trust, weren't trustworthy. The people you were looking to really kind of teach you how to love, weren't loving. You know what I mean? And then we wonder why we grow up and we're somehow different. You know what I mean? Or have some of these difficulties of our own. I don't think it's all that difficult to figure out after a while.
Well, there are so many.
And again, it's not like your intuitive thought is, "Hey, go to Jesus." Go to God. Go to with all that stuff. Again, it wasn't until I kind of went there that all this stuff kind of really started showing itself. So
right, and I mean there are all kinds of examples and situations. It's almost an exception if it's not the case that someone who's abusing a child was also abused as a child, right? And so it's a perpetual.
Well, and even the stuff with my son, we've talked about it here recently. I was like, because I was a little bit of an estranged father with him from when he was about 2.5 to about 8 or whatever. But I was afraid at that time because you were always told, right? And a little bit of that is getting experience, getting other people kind of building into you that, hey, since you were abused, chances are you will abuse too. And then, I had feelings around them and, stuff like that. That was hard to manage. So, it was easier to just be like, ooh,
right.
You know what I mean? Wow. So without getting too deep, because who knows, he could be watching, I don't want to tell our whole story, but it's, look, I was kind of looking for this thing because in C.S. Lewis too, he kind of talks about how, God is what we need the most and everything, but yet he's also, kind of this supreme power. He's so big, whatever. He's the scariest thing too. I think if we really got in the presence of his power, we would be scared crapless.
Right.
You know what I mean? Right. Like it would just be like, because we're used to, we have a hard time dealing with human superlativeness, right? You know what I mean? Right. Let alone the omnipotence of God and, his holiness and so forth. So it's hard. He's the thing we need the most, but he's also the thing we're most afraid of.
Right.
You know what I mean? In a way. And so I kind of believe that when CS kind of put it that way, I was like, he's right. We talk about God as being love and this thing, like we should all get up and get in there gushy with him and hug him. and really, I think I'd be like,
probably just like
do I come in? Or, you know what I mean? Right. Like he would have to invite me and keep inviting me somehow, right? Or else I'd be scared to go.
Right.
So
thank goodness he keeps inviting us.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I wanted to talk about and touch on too is kind of what I believe. Hey Maria, good to see you. Hey Andrew. If you're just popping on or if you joined us later, please comment, let us know you're here, and please share this on your page with your friends so they can join the conversation. I wanted to make sure that I make this point because one of the things that I get really frustrated with church people or whatever is when they say things like, oh, well, God took your child home. He needed another player on the Heavenly Softball League. Or God gave you cancer because whatever. And I just want to go ahead and clarify that because I don't think that is they say that to try to be comforting, I guess. But God took, and when, and this is what I didn't want to do either in this talk, was just kind of sugarcoat the answer with, oh, well, God knows better than us and we're never going to know, and whatever. And that is true. But I don't feel like that's a good answer for people who are going through things that are hurting. And I also don't think, like, I understand that we're trying to be comforting when we say things like, oh, well, God took him home and whatever. But I don't think that that's good, because if you're telling people who are on the outside, on the fence, or maybe they're just starting a relationship with God, or even somebody who's been a believer for a long time, if they start believing God killed their child or killed their spouse or whatever, and God put cancer on, like, I for me, that makes me go, well, holy crap, I don't want anything to do with that guy. Like get me away from that God. Like, who wants to know that God? And kind of what I have learned and studied and been taught and understood for myself is that God doesn't have any diseases to give you. Like, God didn't create disease. He doesn't have them. Mm-hmm. Like, that all comes, again, from the broken world and from the enemy. And I also do not believe that God kills people just because, like, God is love, and everything good, kind of the really dummy proof way to think about it is everything good comes from God, everything bad comes from Satan or from human or evil or whatever, the fallen world. And so kind of what I wrote down was, when we start blaming God for things that are a result of the brokenness of this world, we drive people away. And so I think that's really important to kind of bear in mind, when we're talking to people and when we're trying to meet people in this place. But I do believe that God allows things to come into our lives, because God can stop things, right? God can stop or fix or do anything, because he is all powerful. He has that ability. He has all the power in the world that's ever been. And so then the question is, well, then why does God allow things sometimes? Why does he allow situations or circumstances or sickness or whatever to come into your life? Why does he allow that rather than stopping it? Why does he kind of make you walk it out with him rather than healing you instantly, divinely? That was the situation with my gallbladder. I dealt with that it was about a year that I walked out this process of my healing in my gallbladder. Today it's totally healed. I can eat anything that I want. It's still in my body. It's great. But, like, I wanted God to heal me supernaturally, like, instantly, and that isn't what happened. God still healed me, but, like, why did he allow me to walk that out for 9 months, a year, however long it was? And it was all those things that he taught. But what I believe, in retrospect, what I've seen is there was so much that I grew through in that period. There was so much that I learned. There was so much that he taught me that I wouldn't have learned had I not gone through that situation. So I believe that there are many, many reasons why God allows things into our lives. And those reasons are, first of all, to grow us, to draw us to him. Like Jess said, when God puts things in our lives that we can't handle ourselves, it's that moment where we're forced to acknowledge, I'm human, I'm limited, I can't handle this on my own, and I have to rely on God to get through this. Of course, that's what he wants for us. The bottom line is God allows things for our good and his glory. And so we're not always, like we talked about, we're not going to have answers for why these things happen. Not this side of heaven anyway. We're never going to get those, because we can never see the big picture like God does. But he allows things to happen to us on a smaller scale in our life, on this earth, in a season, whatever, for the bigger picture, for his bigger plan, to act things out for our good in the long run. I heard Joyce Meyer say that God will let anything come into your life if it's going to draw you closer to him. Like, if it's going to drive you to him, yeah, he's going to let you go through that and deal with it. Yeah.
He's certainly going to keep inviting you in, right?
Right, exactly.
I think, as we say,
right.
Again, we're kind of getting into a few different issues here. We can talk about, the fact that God's really outside of time. I think that's a Christian principle. We always deal with things in time. Mm-hmm. So, our moment is now, and then the next one and the next one, and we really don't know what's going on. With God, he just sees our life.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, in a way, he doesn't, so if you ask, well, how can God, deal with the million prayers he just got in this hour or something like that? Right. Well, it's because he has all of eternity to deal with them. He doesn't have, this hour just to deal with it. And, that might explain that how because that prayer and stuff's been coming where, 2 months down the line for us, it gets answered, where that was kind of in his time, he was just, when he got to it or that kind of thing. So, and again, then you were kind of talking about just because he could, or, his, I almost want to say, that whole free will's a bitch thing. You know what I mean? Because it kind of comes in. It's like, look, you can't give choice to, the creatures you created, you know what I mean, or whatever, and then like take it away from them at will and just be like, well, wait a minute, I wasn't going to let you choose to do that. Now I'm not going to let you. But he's going to use it all. And again, if he's not limited by time, he already kind of knows what's happening. I think he can still allow us to kind of have our choices, but then he can kind of see what those are and then, fit that into the plan somehow or something like that. But again, in, another C.S. Lewis. I'm all over C.S. Lewis today, right? That's and this is the problem with pain. He talks about, how God, just because he has his omnipotence. So here it is, right? Just a little short excerpt. His omnipotence means power to do all that is intrinsically possible, but not to do the intrinsically impossible. You may attribute miracles to him, but not nonsense. This is no limit to his power. If you choose to say God can give a creature free will and at the same time withhold free will from it, you have not succeeded in saying anything about God. Meaningless combinations of words do not suddenly acquire meaning simply because we prefix to them the two words God can. So I think I'll just stop there. I mean, that's really all we read. So just, I think we get folks that are intellectually capable of kind of disguising, the truth a little bit. It sounds right. There's some truth to it, and often lies are, very, there's something about them that are true. There's a little bit of truth to them. So, it's tough but when you get with folks that have some great wisdom and really know about God and really, understand the English language, because folks, we're having a hard time with the English language these days, right? People have forgotten what words are, and they say words and, don't know the meaning of them and, stuff like that. And I'm just as guilty. But, so just because he can doesn't mean he should or, and he's not going to do something that's nonsensical.
Well, and he's like you said earlier, we were talking before the video, he's not going to do something that takes away your free will. Because that's a rule that he has set, right?
Right.
And so if you're going to choose to keep going down a path, to keep doing things, to make those decisions that are going to lead to something that's painful for you in the future, like that's the choice that you made. You had a really cool example about that too, because you were saying, God removed me from a painful situation. And they said that in this book. They talked about how God will basically save us from ourselves. He can use pain to protect us from ourselves. And, you talked about that. And, he took me out of the relationship because you were praying to God to be taken out of that relationship.
Like I was depending on a source that wasn't sustaining for my life. I was my everything that was coming from me or that I was getting energy from was not a life-sustaining source. And it's something that, like you said, obviously prefixed to that was me, God, can you help me? I need your help. I can't do this anymore. So the outcome of that was God removing me from that situation, taking me from that source that wasn't allowing life to something that would have, like you said, he knows something good was going to come out of it. Now, the path wasn't the one I would have chosen if I would have...
She went to prison to get out of a relationship.
If I would have been had a list of stuff, can we pick from these, it wouldn't have probably been one of them that I would have picked. But, like you said, you grow out of those situations, and he knew something good was going to come out of that. And so I didn't see it at the time, but he was changing me from a non-life sustaining source to a life sustaining source.
And we're not going to even remotely go down this rabbit hole right now, but we did a video, Talaria or Talaria and Jenny and I actually did a video. It was the spiritual warfare video that we did where I quoted, what's the name of the book? I told you about it, Destined for the Throne by Bill Hybels. And in that book, he talked about how God, this is to your free will point, that God has the ability to do anything, anytime, to fix everything, to take everything away, to make everything perfect. But again, he gave us free will, and he won't violate that. And here on this earth, he has given his church, us as Christians, if you fall in that realm, he has given us the authority over this earth and this realm, and the way that we control that. There are a few different ways that we control that. It all has to do with spiritual warfare. Go check out that video. But one of the things that Bill Hybels says in that book is that God can do whatever, but he will not absence the prayer for it. So that's on us. That's our responsibility to be praying for God to move in different ways, to be praying for evil to be removed, to be praying for whatever that's going on in the spirit realm that is causing a lot of these things to happen. It's our responsibility to be praying for those things in order to release God to move here on this earth.
Well, that's the relationship, right? And, so again, kind of, and we're in the interest of time, can't really dive into too much. It's kind of, quick hitting some of this stuff, but in order to have a relationship, there has to be free will involved. The only reason we're hanging out together or whatever is because we both decided it was an okay thing to do, and we're, whatever. But, if we decide not to, we've got, I think that's also what God,
of course,
is kind of talking about. He's like, look, you need to come with me. This is the relationship to have. And, it's not a relationship unless you can choose it. So.
Right.
Well, speaking of relationship, we kind of talked about, and you have a story even to share on this too, but one of the things you learn, not that you want to go through things, but developing that relationship through that struggle with God is one of the things that has most changed my life. And that when you're in the middle of a situation, God is in the middle of that situation with you. And knowing that and really truly believing that is life-changing. Knowing that I'm sitting in this struggle, but I have to talk to you about it, and I have to pray to you, and I can't run from you, because if I run from you, then I'm running from the person that's sitting right next to me in this whole thing. So I think that's, huge in anything, regardless of how it happened or when it happened or what it is, and how horrible it is, just knowing that regardless of what it is, if you're in the middle, then God's sitting in the chair right next to you. You're not alone. You're, and really drawing off of, really treating it like he's sitting next to you in the chair, be like, I'm having a rough day, gosh, this sucks, and I have a conversation with him about it. What is the purpose here? What is the plan? What can I do? That's gonna show your glory in this situation. I think is so huge.
I actually hope we're not, at least from my standpoint, coming across too smart about it all. Because even though it's like I have some experience with some of it, and read, and again, I think if I didn't get sick, I would have never gotten to this point to where I would have taken the time off in order to even look at some of this stuff. I'd have been running and gunning and doing whatever. So and while look, I'm going through stuff even this weekend, with my illness and so forth, that I almost couldn't come here for it. So, and my friends, I've got, if you ask the Oakleys or the, Renos or, the people I talk to kind of daily or weekly about what's going on with me, you know what I mean? They'll be like, who's that guy talking on it? You know what I mean? Because he does an awful lot of bitching with us. But, so, it's like, you struggle. Because I'm really hoping that God has this thing, that Jesus has this thing, but again, it's kind of up to me to go to him to say, hey, and I'm not very. So I know what I ought to do, right? You know what I mean? Now, what am I gonna do?
Right. Well, these things I even say to you is not anything I do. It's not something I do every time. Like you said, I'm not smart about it. I don't make these smart decisions every time. I've made it probably less times than I've made the non-smart decision.
Right.
So this is just from one experience that I'm like, I finally made the right decision. Maybe. It's like I've made the wrong decision so many other times. I'm not the world's expert on making storm decisions. That's not on my, so it's like, but you're right. We just. And
I'm told, even through the reading and the studyings and stuff, that if you if you keep going towards it, like if you actually were to kind of get it, that it would be better than anything that you could possibly think of or try to do on your own. And I keep resisting that whole thought. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, I kind of still like this thing,
the other one.
that thing, and you know what I mean? Her, you know what I mean? So, it's tough to, kind of let God, and keep going to him with all that stuff and seeing what happens as opposed to making things happen on your own.
Right, absolutely.
Knowing what you ought to do.
Right.
And we know what we ought not do, right?
Hashtag real talk.
Right. Hashtag smart decisions and not everything.
So, yeah. So, I'm trying to think about how to even wrap all this up and bring it to a head if there's anything else that I want to talk about. I know. And I feel like we kind of got a little off topic, but it's all good. It's all good. So I'll read this quote because it's by C.S. Lewis. Real quick.
All right, sweet.
So he says in in the book, The Questions Christians Have No One to Ask, it's just listing the different reasons, why God, again, why he lets us go through things. And it's exactly what JD was saying with his illness. He can use pain to grab our attention and teach or redirect us in ways that will be important in our lives. C.S. Lewis says, God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks to us in our conscience, but shouts in our pain. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. God is willing to use pain if that's what it takes to rouse us and the people around us. So again, that's kind of what Joyce was saying with, if it's going to drive you to him, into dependence in him, into relationship with him, then that's worth it in the long run for you and, the big picture. So I did want to wrap up, though, by just saying that, because we're getting close to an hour, and I always want to keep these way less than an hour, and it never happens, but we're getting there, so let's wrap this one up. And this can be, I'm sure this will be an ongoing conversation that we can have. If you have questions, please post them. If you're going through something, if you're in a place where you're asking this question, please reach out. I'd love to talk to you. I probably won't have any answers for you, but I will listen to you and I will love you. But the biggest thing that I wanted to wrap up with is, no matter what you're going through and how painful it is, or how painful it's been, whatever, I like I said, I know what it's like to be in a place like that. And I know how easy it is in that place to, just turn on God and be like, dude, what the crap? But I want you to know that in that place, he sees you, he's listening to you, he cares about you, and he never leaves you. I need you to know that. He wants you to know that. I feel like there's so much comfort in that no matter what we're going through, we're never alone. He's always there. And kind of the story, I just remember this story that I read in Christine Cain's Unashamed book. I read that this came out a few years ago, but the book was great. But this one story just stuck in my brain, and I think I may have even told it in a video before. But basically, she's talking about Christine Cain is a author and Christian speaker, minister. She's a huge ministry around the world. But what she writes about in this book is that sometimes when we go through things, this is what we do a lot, right? We go through things, we get past them, and then we just move on. Like, okay, I just need to move on with my life and be done with that, and we just leave it in the past without really ever dealing with a situation and really processing what we went through. So she's talking about God sometimes takes us back to painful situations that we've already gone way past to bring us through, like, okay, no, now we're going to go back and work on this. So she was abused as a child, quite a bit through her childhood. And so God was taking her back, after she's already in ministry, after she's doing all these great things. But God's like, okay, there are places in your heart that aren't healed. I'm going to take you back and we're going to work on that. And so while she was going through that, she was in therapy, and her therapist was having her literally like almost go into a trance and take herself back to that place where she was being abused. And so it's like, okay, you're in that room what's happening to you. Remember everything that you were going through, everything that happened. How did that make you feel? And she's just taking her through all this. And Christine is wanting to resist it. She's, I don't want to think about this. I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to be here. Get me out of here. But the therapist keeps her there, and it keeps digging and digging and digging. And finally, as she goes through all of it and describes and relives this situation, a lot of it she'd blocked from her mind, but she relives every moment of this, at least one abuse episode. And she really kind of comes out of the trance sobbing and screaming, God, why didn't you do anything? God, why didn't you save me from that? You could have. Why did you let that happen to me as a little tiny girl? And the therapist said to her, now look back in that room and zoom out. And where is Jesus in that room? And what Christine Caine saw in that moment, what God gave her the revelation of, is that Jesus was sitting in the corner of the room that she was in, where she was being abused, and he was sobbing. Because he was there the whole time. And he loved her so much. And what was happening to her was breaking his heart as much as it was hurting her. And that's the way that it is, you guys. That's how much he loves us, and that's how much he cares about us. And it's that real. And just reading that story, and hopefully it kind of took you to that same place, being able to visualize that whatever you're going through in life, no matter how hard it is, no matter how painful it is, that he never leaves, and he's sitting there right beside you, sobbing through your pain because it hurts him just as much. He doesn't want those things to be happening to you. He doesn't want you to be feeling the pain that you are. And so I just want you to remember that the next time that you go through something and you're tempted, like we all are, to just cry out, God, why are you doing this to me? And like, why? Just know that like it's not him trying to hurt you, and that he is going to make it for your good, and he is going to use it for his glory no matter what, and that he's there the whole time. So just kind of rest in that promise and that picture, if you will. And I really think that that'll bring you some comfort. I know that it has me in different situations. So that is all the real talk that we have for tonight.
That was some real talk.
Okay.
With Rachel
That's good.
We can talk
really
about
heavy and deep.
Can we show them this book real quick?
Absolutely, yeah.
So, C.S. Lewis's book, he's got a signature series. It's like $30 and you get like 7 books in it.
Yes.
So, Mere Christianity, Abolition of Man,
There's another one you mentioned. The Screw
lots
Tape
of
Letters.
Screw Tape Letters are in there, The Problem of Pain, so...
heavy lifting.
It is
heavy lifting.
It's very, very heady.
Yeah.
And so be ready for that. And
if you don't mind me reading pages 5 times over like I had to do, then it's fine.
It's a study guide.
Right. It is. It's some deep stuff, but it's good. It's good. So, love you guys. Appreciate you guys. We will be back. What was the date that we said?
I think it was July 29th.
We'll be back at the end of July.
Yeah.
24th, 29th, something like that. 29th, it seems like, is what we have penciled in for our next Real Talk. I don't know who my guest will be. I don't know what topic we're covering. Stay tuned for announcements on that. If you haven't already, share this video on your page so your friends can see it. Join along, have the conversation. Thanks for chatting and communicating with us. I see there were some questions on there. I'm sorry we didn't get to those in the video. I will get back to you. And that's it.